Hello and welcome to the July edition of MyTechU. Today we are talking about a topic that is sometimes just not that exciting, but it's so critical as it's the foundation of what really can keep all of us and our networks and our systems secure. So it's critically important, but oftentimes one of the things that people like to forget about. So today we're going to be talking about an update evolution, a partnership for solving an unsolvable problem, because it's never ending. It's always changing, always a moving target. So today we have two members of the MyTech team joining us who are primarily responsible for executing on this aspect of what our customers expect from us as far as helping them keep their networks secure. We have James Moats and Alan Graves, and I'll let the two of them introduce themselves, and then James, maybe Alan, you can start. And then James, you can introduce yourself and take on the presentation from here. So a couple, before I hand it over to you, Alan, a couple housekeeping notes. For those that are listening online right now, please use the control panel to ask any questions. You will be on mute the whole time, but we will do our best to either answer the questions you have throughout the presentation, or if we don't have time to get to all the questions, we will follow up with you offline afterwards. And again, this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our website within the next 24 hours. So without further ado, Alan, take it away. Please introduce yourself, tell us a little about yourself, and the presentation.
Hi, I'm Alan Graves. I'm one of the NOC engineers. Together, James and I, we rebuilt how we did patching, and as we were going through this, we discovered that we needed to change some things along the way. So that's kind of what this presentation is about and how we can present this to you. James?
Yeah, and Alan's selling himself short because he did most of the work, and I was just there as a resource. But I needed him on this to help us figure out where we're going to go, because when we talk about patching or updates or whatever you want to say for the mechanism in which you take a piece of software and you plug the security hole in it, we've discovered that the landscape is changing, both for our company and for IT teams around the world, and generally just IT in general. So it's really been an interesting journey that we wanted to help share some of what we found. And again, it looks unsolvable when you first start poking at it, and we figure out what we think is a strategy to at least attack it and trying to get that unsolvable problem solved. So let's talk about what we're going to go over today. What do we mean by unsolvable? I mean, patching's been around since the 90s, right? So is it really unsolvable? What are we talking about? Why do we need to evolve that practice? We point out some indications that you might be in a bad place, and then we're going to talk about some partnership strategies, not just between customers of MyTech and people like Alan and myself, but really what we're meaning is the people doing the updating and the people who are in charge of making sure that the company is in the right place. So it's usually what we're going to call like a management and an IT person. We'll give you some best practices for each of those parties, and then we're going to talk about the schedule and why it's so important. And we'll wrap up with a couple of questions that everyone can use when they're talking to IT about updates or patching or whatever, just to kind of get a better insight into a process that's often a little bit intimidating and full of a lot of technical jargon. So is this really unsolvable? And when we look at this as an unsolvable problem, it's easy for the IT guy to just shrug at it, just be like, I don't know what we're going to do with that, because if you look back in just 2015 alone, there were over 6,000 recorded CVEs. That's another one of these technical jargon terms. That basically indicates somebody somewhere, whether it was Microsoft or Adobe or some guy in his basement, somebody found an exploitable hole in a piece of established software that needed to be fixed. There were over 6,000 of these recorded in 2015. That's just 1 year. And the problem with these is not that they're in 1 year, it's just that there are 6,000 new ones, and everyone from the previous year is still also out there. So the attack surface is growing. I don't know if it's logarithmic or geometric or some other math term like that. But basically every year, more and more of these are found, and more of these are added to the things that you have to make sure you cover up. It's basically another hole in a leaky boat that you've got to make sure you cover, and if you don't cover it, even if you cover the newest ones, something from 2014 that isn't covered is still a way for somebody to get in. There's plenty more sources of where this is coming from. It used to be When we talk about updates or patching, what we're talking about is Microsoft Windows. Everybody was using Windows. Windows would have the vulnerability. We put a patch on Windows, everything's back to normal. But now there are more and more sources growing year by year. Adobe, Java, VMware, Linux, Cisco, they all have entries in that CVE list, that vulnerability and exploit list. And all of them are bad. And we had to make decisions and put out patches and cover things up, not just for Microsoft, but also to handle those as well. And you look at just Microsoft, who started this whole process and you know, got a lot of flack for it, and they've been doing this for years, right? Well, don't they have it figured out? Why is this still an unsolvable problem in one sense? Well, Windows had 2,800 patches in 2015, just Windows. Not Microsoft Office or Internet Explorer, it's just Windows. It's just too many. If you don't keep up on top of it, you gotta you're gonna get burned. The average desktop had 188 security updates, any one of which could have been a giant hole to let people in. Now, Microsoft has changed the paradigm, right? With Windows 10, if you've heard about this, they've trying to make it different. They're talking about branching, and they're talking about, you know, making this a better, faster, easier process. That's true, but they're really, the target there is they made it, they addressed the issue on a consumer level, and that doesn't always work in a business level. So they got, I would say actually, even compared to people like Apple or Linux or Cisco, Microsoft's got one of the better mechanisms built around the updates issue, but they haven't got it all figured out. And you can't just assume that just by turning on Microsoft defaults that everything's going to be fine. One of the quotes here, we have some resources we'll share with you at the end. When I was doing some research on this, a government study indicated that 59% of all the vulnerabilities identified were due to a failure to apply the associated patch. It's not that we don't know how to fix these things, it's just that the sheer number of things to be fixed can become overwhelming. And a lot of the breaches, the things that you hear in the news from Sony or Home Depot or wherever, they can trace it down to, well, there's that one update that didn't get applied, and they leverage that to get into the whole network.
James, I want to interject here real quick on that particular point. That one quote is really the reason why we're talking today, right? It's the fact that it's not just about applying, hey, yeah, we got to do updates, yeah, you got to reboot your machine. It's because what we're trying to prevent is attacks and threats and vulnerabilities and ransomware and all these things that actually cause productivity issues and so on and so forth. And the reality is, and data loss, exactly. So that's really the key message. And we're not trying to just beat anybody up about it. It's just really trying to realize that one of the core functions that any IT, whether it's an internal IT or an outsourced IT, one of the core functions that they need to fulfill for your organization is patching and updating. And it's one of the core things that if you're not engaged in a partnership like what James and Alan are about to elaborate on, there's still lots of vulnerabilities, and you can't just rely and expect that automation is going to handle 100% of the problems, because it just won't. So anyway, I just wanted to hit on that, because this is the core of why what IT teams should be doing and what outsourced IT organizations should be doing for you. And it really, this is a new paradigm that we've realized, and how we're working to partner with our customers to make sure that this 59% is shrunk to as small a number as possible.
Right. Well, and if you go on to the next one here too, what we're really looking at is, over time, the mechanism in which we did this has changed. Way back in the beginning, excuse me, running over a little bit of a cold here, we had users that just, Microsoft now has updates available. Hey, all you people, go out there and download them, right? Just go do it. Take care of this. It's just like normal maintenance. Every individual user should just take care of it themselves, and we won't have a problem. And that totally didn't work. And then if you look at the second evolution, well, that doesn't work when you just make the other people do it. So now we'll take one entity and we'll make them in charge of everybody. And so basically then, if from a management perspective, if you looked at this when this first started, you went out and you stood in the middle of the floor and you said, everybody go update your stuff. And you went back in your office and you hoped it worked. And then it didn't work. And then you went out and you said, okay, that didn't work, so you guys over here in IT, you make sure that they all get updated when you go back in your office. And it kind of works, but it's getting harder, and I'll tell you what, it's going to get even harder, and I think eventually that mechanism isn't going to work either. And so what we're proposing is that instead of the management coming out and then going away and putting, believing that it's just going to be fine, they need to partner up with the IT team. Because what you run into is this concept of patch fatigue. What Nate's talking about, this is one of the most important things you can do to secure a network, and it's always there. There's always a patch to apply. There's always something that needs to be checked or touched or manually fixed or something like that. There's always the work to be done, and it's never the most important thing in the IT person's radar, and they know that they should be doing it, but they have so many different systems and so many different patches and so many different things to do, they're just getting fatigued. And this isn't, this happens in our organization with me. That's why Alan came on to help me out. This happens in, any organization where eventually the resources just can't keep up doing it the same old way. There's also a lot of increasing regulations around this and a lot of requirements. No longer is it just, oh, we got hacked and our website got defaced, or somebody put a virus that broke Bob's computer. No, right now these vulnerabilities that we're trying to cover up with these patches, if you get the wrong one on there, if you're in certain responsible certain regulations like HIPAA. The news recently was that HIPAA is now about to, if it hasn't already, say that if you get exploited by some of this ransomware, that's actually a reportable violation that you're going to have to disclose that you lost, out to your clients that you got infected. And infections, most of them come through missing patches. So as the requirements get stricter, the regulations go up. Yeah, we need to do a new way of approaching that.
Yeah, I want to hit on that HIPAA part. There's going to be more. We're actually going to be publishing a security blog about that. We're in the final phases of drafting that, and there's going to be some other information coming out. But a recent release in the last couple of weeks is that regardless of whether or not any data was stolen, because some of the nature of ransomware ends up accessing your data, if that data is any type of medical information, it basically creates a disclosure event. There's certain things that are identified in HIPAA as disclosure events where you basically have to notify all your patients that their data could have been compromised. You don't even have to prove whether or not it was compromised or that they took any data or that anybody looked at it. It's just a matter of if ransomware had encrypted your data or hit the medical protected data, it's creating, they're declaring that, HIPAA regulations are declaring that a disclosure event, which can be really embarrassing and definitely a shot to your reputation and the confidence that your patients have in your organization. If again, in some of the basic ways that James is talking about to protect against that, is just making sure things are patched. So
yeah, and I would expect this to get more different regulation and requirements, even if you're not in the medical field, being in a point of sale or financials or government. More and more, it's not going to get any lighter as time goes on. It's going to get more and more strict along these lines. So you can't fall down on this. And again, we mentioned the increasing attack surface, just the fact that, the IT people, they used to be in charge of everybody's workstation and a couple of servers and whatever it took to make those things talk. Well, now they've got these applications and there's stuff in the cloud and there's stuff in the home and the mobile devices. I mean, all these different points that can be approached, and having one IT team trying to keep up on that, the workload's growing. And then you compound all this by saying, well, on the other side, you've got the good guys trying to take care of this. You got the bad guys trying to exploit it. They're getting better and better over time. Every one of those exploits that got released is a potential hole they can use. They got better tools. They got faster machines of their own. They can exploit a wider surface. And once they get in, it's like I said, it's no longer just write a scary message on the wall or drop a thing that just corrupts a file. Now they're encrypting your data and demanding ransom and stealing it and selling it and all this stuff. Basically, the IT team is kind of under siege and they kind of need your help. You can let them go off and do their own thing, but I think it's better if you were in there with them and able to take some of the, help guide them and stay on track with them, because it's not just them that will suffer if some of this goes wrong. It's the whole company that needs to be a part of that will be affected. So they need to have a good working relationship with the people that can help them out the most, which is usually management. Okay, so if we're going to evolve into a management and working partnership, well, what sort of partnership state are we in? So what you don't want to be in, if you're in this kind of partnership, is you don't want black box IT or head in the sand management. And these are some of the ways, it's kind of funny in some ways, of things you would expect. But maybe some of this rings true in your own organization. You've got an IT group, excuse me, it's a frog in my throat. You've got an IT group that says, I got it, don't look, it's fine, don't peek behind the curtain, don't look at the man over you, just, don't ask and don't tell, I've got it. That kind of implies that they may not have it, and they don't want you to know how bad it is, right? And a lot of times that pairs up with a management perspective that IT should just have this covered. This is just working. What do you mean it's not working? I don't want to hear that it's not working. I don't understand the complexities that you have. You just need to make it work, right? Those two things kind of feed off of each other so that they both kind of keep the other side ignorant or stay willfully ignorant, and then, hoping that it never goes wrong. And hope is not a very good security strategy. That's pretty sad.
Management are going to be the ones held accountable in the end, right? And that's one of the challenges and that this really faces, is that I understand that it's confusing, it's difficult, and you oftentimes don't understand. And oftentimes leaders and managers, their job is not IT, but in the end, if the organization has a significant security breach that causes a disclosure event in HIPAA or just data loss or productivity outages, ultimately management's going to be held culpable and accountable. So it's really making sure that we don't hide behind the curtain, and we create the right visibility and partnership between those two teams in particular, James. So I really appreciate you mentioning that and calling that out.
Yeah. And one of the things that we deal with as an external entity is we're constantly trying to not insulate ourselves so that nobody's looking, and set the right expectations so that management doesn't believe that we're going to be 100% of the time. We obviously have very high bars that we try and aim for, but we're trying to get in front of the management. We're trying to get in front of the users. That's the next one. If they don't understand why this is so important, then this is just the nearly unacceptable burden on their work life, right? Why is this always a thing? Why are you rebooting my computer? How come this didn't work? Why is this blah, 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 right? Like, they've got to understand why this is so important, what they can do to make it important, and help out on their end, because that makes everything so much better. You get down into it too, you get to the auditor. If you have an external audit requirement, they come through, they're going to start asking, and then if you start scrambling trying to figure out what's going on, they start noting in their audit reports, there's unacceptable delays in figuring out, how good of a job you're doing. That's something you actually have to do pretty well. Yeah, everyone's got to be firing on the same cylinders here to get the information out to justify a lot of those audits and to pass those audits. And of course, the hackers are going to be like, hey, this is all a big muddle, and we can just waltz in here and do anything we need. So, you hear any of this stuff in an organization, you might want to take a look at how effective is your partnership. So we got some strategies here. What does a good partnership look like? How do you avoid those kind of, philosophies going through the previous slide? You don't want any surprises, right? Nobody wants to be surprised on this stuff. This is a very regimented, regular activity. There shouldn't need to be a surprise. You can handle most of the things without surprising anybody. It's just a matter of setting those expectations. So then we're going to talk about that, about being transparent. Again, as an external company brought in to deal with this, we are trying to aim for a lot of transparency. We want to show exactly where we're having trouble, where your posture is. You need to have a lot of communication between the two entities in particular, the people doing it, the people who are going to be responsible for how well it's working in the end. We think that there's a large educational component to this, where if you can get, everyone's got to be educated, but you can get end users especially, that will help out a lot. And we feel like a successful partnership is going to include a lot of internal regular auditing. Basically, to sum this up, you got to trust that people are doing their jobs, and then you also want to verify it. All right, so what is no surprises? When we talk about that? Again, we're saying we have set expectations. We agree on the definition here. If management expects 0 missing updates on 100% of the important stuff, and IT is aiming for a plus minus of like 5 or something like that, right? There's different ways to measure success here. You got to get on the same page right out of the gate. Then work together to define how you're going to get there. again, this is very regimented. You can define what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, when it's going to happen. You can prepare ahead of time so that people understand this is the mechanisms that we're going to use, and you understand what that's going to do to your users. You know, this is where it really helps to have an IT team or an MSP like Mitek that's really working with your users, and they understand how those users work. You got a bunch of salespeople, they're never in the office, and they work, you know, around the world or something like that. Well, if you have a overnight, quote-unquote, reboot window that applies to the person who's working over in Korea, and he's in the middle of his workday, and all of a sudden his computer reboots because of patching, I mean, that doesn't work. So you got to have an understanding of the impacts and how you can get to a good place where you keep them protected but keep them productive at the same time.
Well, James, I want to use another illustration. I appreciate the example of somebody being in Korea, but I think that's something that, you know, trying to that very few organizations are going to relate to from the standpoint of their staff actually having that happen. And sometimes it's as simple as just, and we had this happen with a customer where they had a laptop and they took the laptop home diligently every single night. That's great because laptops are easy to be stolen, so we appreciate that. But then they just left the laptop off. So the laptop with an evening reboot window didn't get updates for a long, long period of time because the machine was never kept on overnight, and so it never received the command after hours to do that because it was, you know, the instruction set was to not disrupt this person during the regular business day. And there's probably lots of examples of that in different areas where it could just be someone who's traveling and it's in their laptop bag on the airplane. They're not going to get that command. You know, just those kind of things happen on a regular basis. And the point is, and you're like, oh, well, that's maybe only 1 or 2 of my staff, but that's all it takes. It really only takes 1 or 2,
Right.
you know, significant vulnerabilities to really cause a real problem in your world. So, so there's anyway. I just wanted to give another example that is, I know, very common amongst our customers.
Sure. Third shift, same thing. You know, third shift operators, same thing. So, yeah. So if we go on from here, we got our no more surprises worked out. We're going to be very transparent about how it's being done. So IT, this is difficult. They don't like people watching over their shoulders, feeling like they're judged all the time. It's a hard thing. It's not. The perfection is difficult. It's achievable, but it's difficult, and it's going to take a while. So people get, we have a lot of people that really like having 100% accuracy, right? Well, if you keep showing them a 98, 99, they get a little edgy about the fact that they feel like they're not doing a good enough job. But they have to be open to show you that it's being done, that it's not being superseded by other things. There's all this whole important but not urgent, right? The tyranny of the stuff that comes in that, you know, you got to do right away, but it's not as important in the long run as this. You got to keep showing that you're staying on top of it. You got to show progress over time. If it is only 96% the first time you show, or lower, you got to be able to show, well, it's 96, 97, 98, 99. Well, we're back to 97, you know, but we're working our way back up, right? So showing that to auditors also shows them that this is an active process. They really appreciate that. And you got to provide this data and you got to report. You know, the IT team can't believe that somebody's just going to like start randomly clicking around their workstation population trying to figure out if their things are up to date. They've got to have that data and give it to management or any entity that is authorized to receive it and show what's going on. They got to say that, look, you know, we're normally at 99%, but we just had something that broke in our system, and now we're back down to the 80s. But we're working on it, and here's our progress plan, and here's how we're getting out of that. And then really what you want to do is you get a series of reports. You can really quickly identify this user, like Nate was saying, is never on at night. Or this location, if you have multiple site locations, something's wrong and they're always like lagging behind the rest of the company. Or you know, these users are constantly showing us that they have, every time we update this thing, the whole company has a big pain point. So you really want to get some trending over time so you can address these issues and just keep this thing humming along. But it all starts with transparency. And then if we go on to communication, again, you can be transparent, but if you're not communicating that to people that care, it doesn't really matter. So we really have tried, as part of what Alan mentioned, is overhauling our communication. We really tried to change up how often we were talking about patching to our customers. Alan, what's the kind of the standard communication plan right now?
A week before, give or take a day, we will announce to our partners that we are going to have new patches rolled out. And so Stephanie will actually send those emails once I give her the go-ahead. And that's usually about 1 week after Patch Tuesday.
Yep. So we say, hey, we've got these. We do a little bit in internal testing. We do a lot of research. Alan's involved in a lot of testing groups that go and communicate back and forth. A lot of technical jargon goes to exchange that doesn't apply to the end user, but when we decide, here's the ones, we're going to do it, get the people ready for it, right? Then once you're in cycle, we start trying to like get in front of people and be like, hey, there's people that are not helping. There's people that are machines are not on at night. And try and get those people understand why it's important for them to participate, or we're going to have to get a little more aggressive and get on their machine during the day and kind of interrupt their day a little bit. And again, if management is reinforcing this communication, it really strengthens that message. This is not just another thing that IT is saying. IT is always full of, you know, complications and no's and you know, difficulties that make me harder to do my job. If management is actually reinforcing that, no, really, this is an important thing that they have to work with you on, that tends to strengthen that message, and it makes the whole process a lot smoother and gets you a lot closer to the compliance level that you're looking for. All right, I think the next one is education. Yes, very important. We've kind of looked around and decided that, you know, when these users don't understand when they're supposed to be updated, how can we be mad at them when they don't turn their machines on? If that user leaves his machine in his bag every night for a year, well, why didn't we, as the people responsible for updating him, come to him and say, hey, you know, we really need to have that on at night, at least, you know, once in a while, so we can get these updates on. They don't have to have the specifics down, but they understand approximately once a week or once a month or every night or whatever it is that you just come up with, that's what's important, and then they can help accommodate on their side when they're out of compliance. They understand why it's important, so they're more likely to be compliant, and they understand that, hey, if I don't help on the schedule that's preset, somebody's going to be reaching out and, you know, taking over my machine and making me, you know, take longer to do my job. And it's important to extend this. This isn't just an end user education process. The people that are executing this, they have to understand what are the requirements for this business. Are we HIPAA compliant here? Are we have, you know, SOX or one of these other, I can't remember all the acronyms for the government stuff, but, you know, there's different levels of requirements require different compliance. So your IT team needs to understand what are they beholden to, you know, and how, you know, what are their tolerances, how fast can they do it? They've got to be educated either on their own or by management. And management then needs to know how they can confirm that they are compliant when they're questioned, whether to their boss or to an auditor or to whatever entity it is that says, well, you know, are you actually up to date? They have to understand, not just hope, pick up the phone and call somebody and hope, again, that there's data to back it up. They have to understand how they can be checking along the way so that they can, you know, cover their bases before they get to that point. Okay, so we got some better partnership strategies. I think what's the next one here? There, audits, that's right. We've got all these strategies in place. How do we ensure that it's actually being done? Somebody's got to take a look at this. A regular internal audit, again, that old business adage of what gets measured gets managed. You know, eventually, even the best IT guy, if he doesn't have anybody going in there and poking around him to make sure it's actually working, he's going to start relaxing and sitting back on it. You know, you have to get somebody in there to look at the overall health regularly, and it's not the person who's normally doing it. Even if it's just a manager picking up the report and really looking at it once in a while and really asking some hard questions about what about this, what about that. You don't want to just let the IT guy coast, because again, the weight of this over time and the sheer quantity that they're dealing with is just going to make this a lot less efficient if somebody's not in there occasionally saying, hey, what about this? Can we do better? Again, it's not about being perfect out of the gate. Sometimes you kind of have to be, but really their focus is at least initially, how do we get better? How do we keep this going? We got to make it sustainable and improvable over time. Sometimes management can come in and say, why is the sales guy's laptop never updated? And the IT guy is going to say, well, he never participates, and every time I go to get him, he's out of the office. And the management will pick up the phone and say, get in here, bring your laptop, and stop complaining, right? There are ways that management can address this in a non-technical fashion to provide a lot of solutions to quickly get those numbers elevated. And again, if you're regularly auditing yourself, when an external auditor shows up, you've got a nice history to go through. That goes a long way towards getting passing scores. You can say, look, here's what we've been doing, here's what we've been checking that, here's a regular report, here's our audits, here's how time we've been spending on that. You'll get a lot of appreciative nods and a good thumbs up on a lot of audits that way. So let's talk some best practices. We've talked about like some partnership strategies and some ways that areas you want to focus on. Where does it hit the road? Okay, so there's the people that got to execute, right? And if you are, whether you are an entity like us, you're trying to do this for a bunch of different organizations, or you've got your own in-house IT guy, or you've got like a part-time person in the front desk who's supposed to be kind of doing this, which we don't recommend, but if that's where you're at, you got a couple of things that you need to do. And these seem very elementary, right? And this isn't like an advanced calculus here. This is pretty basic stuff. But where it becomes difficult to do is making sure that it works. So you've got to, first of all, and this is one of the hardest things to do, you've got to understand what you've got. Step one, get everything inventoried, all your devices, all the software on those devices that could potentially be affected, so that on step two, when something comes, you have to get yourself involved to understand what is out there that you need to deploy to those software and hardware assets. You have to know what updates are available, but you won't even know, you can't say everything because you have to tailor it to what's in your organization. Then you've got to go to step three, you've got to figure out what's already there, right? You got to have your list, and then you got to go out and find out on all these machines and softwares what is currently installed so that you can find what's the gap. Where do I have to apply? If I've got a list of things I want, here's a list of things I've got. Now then, you've got to get those updates downloaded. This is an important step because it's difficult. These things all take up space. Internet pipelines are always at a premium. You got to pull it down, and you've got to get approved. This update is the one I want. Put it on the machine so that in step 5, when I'm ready, I can install it. And then in step 6, a lot of these times, these are not easy installs. You typically have to install it, reboot the machine, and rebooting a machine is, even if it's a workstation, especially if it's a server, has to be done at certain times to minimize productivity loss. All of these are pretty simple, pretty basic things, but doing them at scale rapidly becomes quite difficult. And any stage here, something can go wrong and silently fail on you, and you won't know that you didn't detect an update, right? And your normal mechanism doesn't see that you're missing a critical update, or you try to download it and you couldn't get it downloaded in the window, or you went to reboot it and the reboot got in a loop or something like that. And so this is the step. An IT person builds this out, does these things, and approaches it in this fashion. It's going to have a much higher likelihood of success, but the execution is still going to be very difficult and needs a lot of attention.
And James, even as an anecdotal, like one of the things you mentioned to me, and I can't remember when this happened, but Microsoft's like utility, and I'm not sure if I'm using the right word, that actually managed whether or not the machine was aware that it needed the updates, or something like Microsoft's Windows Update utility on each and every machine that it has broke. I remember you telling me something about that in the recent past.
Yeah.
As an illustration of another thing that can fail that in this whole process, right, where your visibility of what you think is there and what you think is happening, sometimes it's the what you don't expect that can break and basically create or leave you vulnerable.
Yeah, Alan, have we gotten all those Windows Update agents fixed? I think we're getting progress, but I think there's still a few more to go.
We're going through them, plus the brand new Windows Update client will be rolling this patch cycle. So there's going to be a newer version to replace the older versions and the ones that are lagging behind.
Right, and then of course as soon as that happens, there's a newer version out. If it doesn't install properly, then we've got all these problems starting up again. So yeah, it can take a lot of effort. Now these are not unsolvable, but you got to be aware of these things. So from the management side, that's a lot of technical stuff, right? You're a management level person. You don't give a flip about the Windows Update agent. You just want it to work. So what can you do? Well, you need to understand at a high level your IT department's plan. If they haven't talked to you about a plan, they don't have one, and they're just hoping. And hope is not a good strategy. So you need to understand what they're doing, help them work it out with you. When are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? Who's in charge of this? How are we going to do it if, at this point, how are we going to get this data back? Then you need to make sure that your users are participating in this process and they're not blocking the process, right? That CEO that has his laptop that he hates having ever be updated because he never wants to save his Word document, somebody's got to go talk to that person, and is it going to be more successful if it comes from the IT person or from the management, right? If management goes and says, hey, to keep our company compliant, we got to figure this out, right? If the IT guy's in there, he's just going to tell them, blow them off, and keep on doing the bad practice. Management is essentially, they facilitate communication, right? So whether it's between their own staff or other departments or whatever, this is right in the wheelhouse. Get that communication rolling, get the IT team out there in front of the users, have the users understand, have the users be able to ask questions. In step 4, get reports, right? Ask for them, look at them. It's, at first you're going to be like, what am I looking at? At first you might say, this is awful, I expect it different. Understand these reports, watch for progress, track the progress over time. Hold the IT team, I'm including my tech here, sorry Alan, I'm including us in this, hold us accountable to showing progress month after month. And then get involved, right? Again, if the executive or the salesperson or this old crunchy machine that you can't reboot because it breaks, get involved on fixing that problem. Management's about communication and fixing problems. That's where you can hit your stride here, and the IT team is going to be limited in what they can do. You can go up a level and really attack these problems from a different perspective, a non-technical perspective. Okay. A few more things we want to get through. It is all about the schedule. Alan and I have had lots of discussions about the schedule. Again, this is a regimented, planned for, no surprise kind of process. If you can get the schedule refined and everybody buying into it, it really makes the job easy. You get users educated, you get them reminders, and you start out less disruptive and you get more disruptive over time. If they don't if they don't participate in the scheduling at first, they're going to be forced to by the end. You start with it being overnight. Then you shift to during the day without trying to interrupt them too much. And then if that doesn't work, got somebody on the help desk picking up the phone saying, get off your computer, I got to patch you. You got to, sit here and wait for 5, 10, 20 minutes, half hour while we fix this. So get that schedule done. Now, we did put a picture in here of what we do as an example schedule, right? Super complicated. Sorry. Some of the times you can't gloss over the technical details. But what we're looking at in there is basically in blue are the 2 business hours, typical business hours. In green is when we're looking to run that detection cycle. Again, that takes effort and computer power to get that detection inventory run. So sometimes it'll impact performance. So you don't run it constantly. You pick a couple of times a day to try and make sure that it happens. Then you try in the orange there, you're trying to pull it down so you have enough time to get the things that you need in place. Then right after midnight, in this particular window, we trigger a pre-installation reboot just to clear anything out. We'll try and fire it off just to wipe out whatever's there, get anything that was pending a reboot from before to clear out, comes back up, starts installing the things that's already downloaded. Once it's done, we give it a little gap, then we initiate another reboot just to be sure. And then hopefully by the time the business day starts, everything's up and going again. Nobody's any wiser. Now, this is just one example. I think we did a server in this case. You could do a different thing with workstations, with laptops, server A group versus server B group, but it's all about scheduling this out and getting everyone to understand the schedule ahead of time. We'll save you many, many headaches later on. Okay, so getting to the end, what should I ask IT? Right? I have been listening to this, and I'm a management person, and I understand that. But what do I need to poke at them about? Start with one of the hardest things to answer. Do you, the entity who's managing my computer infrastructure, have a current inventory? They should. It's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. We have a decent, I would say, effort at this, and even so, when we get asked for this, we have to spend some time and effort to make sure that it's right before we say, here it is, right? We maintain it over time, but when we're especially asked, even we have to go in and make sure, because this is a very dynamic thing, this inventory. Stuff comes in and out, stuff gets upgraded. It's difficult to track, and I would say if you're using a spreadsheet to do it, it's nearly impossible to track over time. So make sure that they have that or a method of getting it. Then ask them the hard question. They're not going to like answering this necessarily. What aren't you patching on purpose? Not the stuff that's hard to do. This is stuff we have, as a company, have chosen not to apply updates to anymore. And by the recommendation here is, if you are choosing to run Windows XP, Windows 2003, a couple other operating systems, you are choosing to run things you cannot patch anymore. They are unsupported. Microsoft says, hey, tough luck. You're going to get an exploit on that. We got nothing to help you. You should have upgraded a long time ago. So if you're still running those, the IT person will tell you, hey, the Server 2003 box, sorry, can't patch it. A lot of times vendors will do things like with security systems or voice over IP systems. They will have their own machines on the network that IT just doesn't have access to. They'll be like, I don't know what's going on with that one. Some applications just don't get a chance to be updated, whether for business continuity reasons or for support reasons or whatever, but they should understand that. You got this case again of the CEO's laptop. He never wants us to patch that because he gets mad every time, right? And they'll know those problem users. And again, the one server or the one thing out there that always breaks when we patch it, they'll know, and they've got their own workaround for it. But you should understand what those things are, so you can either help a strategy to get them updated or replaced, or you can at least answer that when the auditor shows up.
And James, I thought those are great points on the patching, and there definitely are. We found we have manufacturing customers, for example, that have multi-hundred thousands of dollars equipment that are run by an XP machine, and it only runs on XP. And if that machine dies, there's like a $70,000 card that they have to replace in order to allow it to talk to a Windows 7 or above machine. So I only say that as an illustration because we do get that there are oftentimes business reasons why some of these legacy programs or operating systems are running. But part of what James is saying is we should A, be aware of them, and B, have a plan around them to mitigate whatever risk could possibly present the business because of those things having to be around. Sometimes it's the financial is example of the manufacturer that has that card. That's a real-life example of one of our customers. And sometimes it's just taking time to transition off of a server application that only runs on 2003, and it's a major operational process change to go to the next version, and it just takes time. But what can you do in the meantime and make sure you're aware of it and you work with your team to have a plan around it?
No
to mitigate whatever risk is present. Exactly, no surprises.
Yeah, no surprises is what you're going for here. You don't want to be surprised as a management to find out that that thing was never patched, and IT assumed that you knew that all along. I would also make sure you ask them who is communicating to the users. My guess is the answer is going to be a shrug of the shoulders and be like, I don't know, they're just supposed to know this. Well, that's not a good answer, I don't think. And I think as a management person who's interested in getting this better, you can help take a leadership role in that and help get that communication rolling, whether it's from IT or they report to somebody else that then helps deliver the message, whatever it is, you can help be a part of that solution. I'd ask them, have they independently verified it? Now, this is a kind of a sore subject sometimes because it's difficult enough to get a read on what's going on, but even if it's to the point where they take a network scanner tool or even just walking around and spot check a couple of random machines, are they proving that the reporting that they're working off of, if they say that they're 100% right, have they checked? Have you checked? Ask them if they're checking regularly. Are they following up with any of this just to make sure? Because a lot of these times, like what Alan was saying, the new Windows Update agent, well, the old one may not be able to tell that it's missing updates. And if it doesn't update itself, then it won't know that you're still missing things, but you'll still have a nice, clean, happy report, except that it's missing this recent critical update. So you really want to be checking occasionally. And finally, I'd ask them, okay, so what can we do to tell the users what they have available to learn, right? Well, when is our patching window? Or what do you mean by this? Or what should I do in this case? What sort of resources do you have available to them, whether it's the help desk that you have or a couple of documents on the company intranet or whatever it is, to give them a little bit of something to go to so they can be more participation in this process. So a couple of starting points anyway, because again, from a non-technical perspective, addressing the question of how to keep things up to date is not easy. So these are some ways to get that conversation started. So that's about it. Now, I got some resources up here that Alan and I were looking at when we put together this presentation a while back and helped shape what we chose to do in implementing what we hope is a more evolved patch management strategy to get updates on your network. But yeah, some of that's a little dry, but it's some good stuff in there, and especially for IT people who are looking for some more in-depth technical than we got into here. That's a good place to go.
And I will, this is Nate, I will add these links to the follow-up email that will be sent to everyone tomorrow, and it will also include a link to the recording of the MyTechU session around patching the update evolution. So stay tuned for these. You don't have to try and either, I don't think you can click your screen, and it's probably a long URL to try and write down, so don't worry about that. We'll include those links in our communication tomorrow. So, and I did get just a question, and I can also get slides out to those who are interested. So I will make sure to connect and get those slides out for anyone who wants them. You'll get the email from me, so if you want the slides, go ahead and if anybody else would like a copy of the slides, go ahead and email me, reply back from the email, and I will make sure to get those to you. So, but with we do try and stay on time. We are about 1 minute over what we usually do, 1 or 2 minutes. So I do want to say thank you to James and Alan, who work very hard to keep our customers as safe as possible with just doing some of the foundational work of patching. And I invite any and all of you to engage from a leadership and management perspective, from an execution perspective, to help be part of this this solution, because it's only solvable if we work together. So so yeah, any final thoughts, James or Alan, before we conclude?
Tough subject, but hopefully got some good info out there, and we look forward to engaging with people that want to hear more about it from us.
Very good. Well, thank you both, and everyone listening now or in the future, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.